Hey, train your plants every day. George Scoville coming at you from the STEM universe here. And for you guys that are new, guys or gals that are new in STEM, that's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So as you should be able to tell from the heading on the video here that you'll see this to be on YouTube, this is an uncrackable code. Now, firstly, the thing about an uncrackable code is it has to be crackable. It's a contradiction, a paradox, if you will, and all kinds of different paradoxes you'll see out there. Time travel, mathematics, psychology, whatever the difference may be. But you're going to need to know those things. So before we get into any of those topics, I got to give you all some background, specifically on the code type that I'm dealing with, and why it's important, because this is an actual code pretense. Now, before I get too deep into what this is, again, there's going to be a lot of causally parallel information that you'll need to know, general relativity, if you will. Firstly, this is a basis of law, psychology, chemistry, physics, psychology, whatever, anything under that idea, because as a frame of reference, you can use one thing to describe anything. A law can be described, whether it be law on 55 miles an hour in this case, can be idealized in any law physically that you would do. You want to stay within these parameters and these dimensions to idealize it. But there are lots of other spectrums where this can be very different. So there's your basic pretense, if you will. So you're going to need to know a lot of stuff, and this is going to be a few video series in 15-minute clips. It's a science technology in terms of frame of reference, how much you can actually pack inside of this engineered mathematics, or this transposition, this causal squaring platform that's parallel to this idea. Now, the code I'm going to be talking about here today is a variation of a few different codes. A mono cipher, a poly cipher, the Enigma base, a bunch of other basically integrated or entangled systems that are engineered, a little bit of science, a little bit of technology, for a mathematic, but also parallel psychology base and what have you. So the code I decided to design, let me give you just the breakdown here, is first you're going to open this book and you're going to see that the basis of this is the art of war. Ooh, very interesting, yes? Yes. So as you lay it out, you're going to use the art of war in A version, A mathematics, A mechanics. There are lots of other ways to use this code, but that's the way it was generally designed to be used. Don't lock yourself into one design principle on this. This is one of the reasons it's uncrackable. Unless you as a general are training this specifically for somebody that you want, or a system, computers or what have you, that can be parallel. You don't need to use Sun Tzu, you can use whatever. Sun Tzu, army survival, psychology, Dante's Inferno, the Bible, I don't care, it doesn't matter. Their matter doesn't really matter, just the contents of the given space is all that matters. Space isn't exactly matter, as we know about dark matter and dark energy. Those things are important, and these will help you psychologically understand coding, the idea of this transposition and entanglement idea that goes into it. And this is why this code is so potent in the way it works. It's an art of war, weighing amechanical resistances in space and time. That's code. Space, time. Think about codes for a second here. Hands-on, this is, you can bite this like an apple in gravity. Motion, laws of motion are going to apply here very specifically. So basically, I broke down the art of war. You know, you start with each psychological trigger and the way you're going to need to engineer and design your platform. There are many subtle differences in engineered forms that could make or break the way you base this in terms of the laws of how a specific code works. Now, why do I emphasize A so much? Well, you're going to need to know A in the base of a monocipher. Monocipher means basically I could transmit the idea of A to B, and then the rest of the letters follow that mathematical function. A could be C, and then the continuance of that idea in a mathematical sequence. It can also be the base of a polycipher, that any one of those models could AX or BY, or causally function the Z. A is Z, A is B, and A can be any letter. A can be any letter in this idea. Now that's the general model of any code, and that's another variation type. A lot of people do it. That's the monocipher, it's the polycipher, it's the Enigma system. Many different versions of code use that, and they can be pretty intense depending on how you do it. You can use logic systems, you can use random systems, you can use any basis of a mathematical principle. At pi, I jump at every 3.14 and I round it off. So basically at every 3, I'm going to run a jump. Or I'm going to run it to the decimal thereof. You know, I run 3, then 1, then 4. You can do it like that. That's a monocipher base. In a way, it's also a polycipher base, that it's not just a single notation. That's important to understand why I used this psychological principle, using something like the art of war being very deceptive. You know, it is the greatest matter of any nation. What else we got here? Their logic devices leading to victory must not be divulged beforehand. Even if you wanted to. Even if I wanted to give you all this information, there's still many different sequences. Even though I'm giving you all this information, I'm not going to give you my specific version on how I would go about training this. So I can have all this pre-engineered and designed and change it, just like I would change the number of the code position that I used, or the quatrain in Sun Tzu that I base that off for given certain spaces, or what have you, at any moment in time. It can be a model of any one of those, any one A, B versions of those things. Very important to understand that. Most of the time it's not the problem that any one of those basic code variables is a problem. Monocipher next to a sequence where I chose a polycipher base next to it of a different sequence, another monocipher, instead of just doing this, I'll go in a binary model. That's still, even though I'm using 2 monociphers, a polycipher base. It gets very, very confusing, but with the proper logic, it just follows out like the laws of physics or the laws of motion, that this force into that force has an equal resistance on that, or why I would make those choices or not. So it's a binary system that as you add certain characters, 1, 0, or 0, 1, or 1, 0, you actually have multiple choices. 0, 1, 0 is a letter, 1 is a letter, A, B, and I could go 0, 1, 2, 2 is obviously B by this sequence, or C, or I could do that differently, that 0, 1 is A, 1, 0 is B, or 0, 1, 0 is B. You can take those ideas, and it's just like binary code, this idea that is an infinite sequence that could make anything at any point in time. It's an abruptly long sequence of reciprocating terms in Erode's conjecture, comparatively to Fermat's last theorem in AX BY equals CZ, or excuse me, AX plus BX equals CX, comparatively to BX. They're both the same thing, but how you orientate yourself, how you perceive them, could be the difference of how you understand them. An abruptly long sequence of reciprocating terms is AX, mathematically. It's also the idea that it's abruptly long, so in some circumstances, some cases, some spaces and times, it can also be BY or BX. A very different idea, that this moment in time can't go back, so therefore it has to be X. When you do that in the same second, you need a different trigger psychologically to define what that is, and here in this case it's Beal's mathematics, Beal's conjecture of ax plus by to keep a chronological timeline system in mind, causally ending this function, where its dimensions are necessary. Instead of c squared, energy matter equals the speed of the sun, or the speed of light in this case, squared. Everything is based in that model. It's energy. How much energy can be engineered to be contained inside of a code? When you break that down, you can say troops, you could say this computer purpose that makes this little robot machine do this. Each of them are broken down into an infinite fractal system that has X amount of energy, an infinite amount of energy that can be parallel designed or idealized to mean anything else. So, pretty simple base, right? You know, just nothing to it. You know? As you write this code out, there's a parallel system to it for my specific engineering. It works individually great for all types of different coding and its own individual code base, but it can be specially engineered for one specific model for variations on how you want to use it specifically, or multiple copies thereof, again, AX, BY, CZ. And you're going to need to know a lot. Remember, this is psychology as much as it is code. When you understand psychology, the transposition code is physics. Let's say, for instance, you had a psychologist. The mono cipher is to say, I want to use this psychology to take a person, and make them be something. The idea is also causal to AX, BY. By this time, you should also be able to realize that this is physics. You have to not take their mind in consideration in psychology, but also the physical dimensions, the physical points. Numbers in a line on a code, strength theory or superstring theory, if you will, work in the exact same way. Mathematics is the parallel to this in the causal chemical reaction or physical chemical reaction that can't be untangled once this birthday cake is baked. It's your first day on Planet Murphy here. That you're going to start to realize this is physics as much as it is psychology, because an abruptly long sequence A abruptly long sequence, A mechanics, there is no difference. They are equal by the laws of motion and how you define a term. Neurology. Well, without the physical chemical components that make that up in the spectrum game, you really don't have anything, right? It's a hologram, if you will. It's just how you program the game. As you plan out a battlefield in code, it's basically not letters or anything. In terms, they're points. And as you process them into new information, a transposition code to something different, it's a combination of mathematics, terms, linguistics, psychology, and what have you. That's why this is a trainer's guide for general relativity. You want to be a general. That's the point here. You want to crank the gear and have all the planets around you do what you tell them based off of your mass. It's very important to understand those games, but it flips. The same change flip in mathematics is the idea that how do we tell the strength and mass there of a planet or a star? We use the planets. So without those numbers, sometimes it's impossible to determine truly what that mass is. And there's plenty of dark matter, dark energy, or holes in the process, just space. You know, there's a space inside this code that has to be engineered that means no letter at all. Nothing. It's just the space between two words. Without that space, you just have a bunch of gobbledygook, or multiple things where you could miscommunicate or misunderstand the message. That's the base. I mean, you don't need any of that really information to make this code work specifically. but you should. Because if you do, you're going to better understand how to create that message.